Morning Talk with Siki Mgabadeli.
And it's 8.5 past 9, talking about the refugee comment debate this morning, taking calls as well on 0891104207, SMSs to 34701. Let me read you the tweet that caused the storm. It was on the 20th of March, or that was Tuesday, from Helen, who is a Western Cape Premier, saying, while Eastern Cape education collapsed, Western Cape built 30 schools, 22 new, 8 replacement, mainly for Eastern Cape education refugees, 26 more new schools coming. And then, of course, the storm started. So we're going to be chatting to Helen, leader of the DA and Western Cape Premier, as well as Lindiwe Zulu, who is an NEC member with the African National Congress. Thank you so much to both of you for your time this morning.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you very much, Siki.
Thank you very much, Siki, and good morning to all South Africans this morning.
Thanks to both of you again. Helen, let me start with you. I've been listening to the debates and your reaction to it and seeing all the tweets flowing through on Twitter and the reaction that people had, and many demanding that you apologize for using the word refugee. You've stuck to your guns and tried to explain what you meant by it. Will you ever concede that using the term refugee was possibly not a good idea?
Well, you see, the response has amazed me. And I think the real reason is that it's a reflection of South Africans, but mainly the ANC's attitudes towards refugees. They have a very negative attitude towards refugees, which is the root of much of the problem that we have in our society, whereas I have never had a negative connotation. You see, the concept of a refugee is not a negative connotation towards the person who has to flee for their rights. It has a pejorative connotation, a negative connotation on the conditions that forced them to flee. For example, the condition of education in the Eastern Cape. Now, if you look at all of the definitions, refugee in its broader sense is someone who is forced to take refuge. And I think when you look at the complete collapse of education in the Eastern Cape, anyone who wants their education rights, who lives in that province, is forced to take refuge. In the narrow sense of the definition, for technical and legal reasons, the United Nations has defined a refugee as somebody who has to cross an international border. But when that happens, the United Nations has to start paying and giving resources. But very much part of that definition, and also assisted now by the United Nations, is this category of people called internally displaced persons who also seek refuge. And they're also displaced because they cannot get their rights where they live. And that actually exactly describes people in the Eastern Cape who want education and who want healthcare. They can't get it there.
But you didn't use the term internally displaced person. So let's just stick with refugee for now. We'll get to that, and we'll get to those people from the Eastern Cape. In a country where already people, when they debate, we can't do it without labeling people. So here what's happened is that instead of debating the education system in this country and in the Eastern Cape, where there are major problems, the issue has now become inflamed with people saying it's reminiscent of the days of the Dompas. And let's not forget that's not too long ago. People still have wounds from that.
But Siki, let's take a look at what we're doing. We're not having the Dompas, quite the opposite. We are building 30 schools in 3 years. That's quite unbelievable. To make provision for people in the main, not only, but people in the main who are fleeing from a province where they can't get education. So what that is saying is how much we're doing, not that we're keeping people out, and not that we're preventing people from exercising their rights. Indeed, the Western Cape is the only place where many of those poor students can exercise their rights. So the money still goes to the Eastern Cape, according to the formula, the Fiscal and Finance Commission's formula. The money still goes to the Eastern Cape, but the Western Cape delivers the service. And far from introducing the Dompas and keeping the people away, which is the last thing we want to do, and I've fought the Dompas my whole life, far from doing that, in 3 years we built 30 schools, 22 new schools, 8 replacement schools, with 26 more new schools coming.
But that's, the debate is that the point is that no one's talking about that, you see, and all because you used a term that has offended people.
Well, I don't think really that it has. I think the ANC sees their gap, and they want to inflame passions. They want to keep people hating each other, and they use any gap to try and do so. The real crisis is for the ANC that people can't get their education rights in most of the ANC-run provinces. They can't get those rights. They're coming out illiterate and innumerate, and that is the crisis of human rights. That is taking us back to apartheid.
Right.
In fact, in the Eastern Cape, I would argue that education is even worse now than it was under the abominable system of apartheid. You know, under apartheid, under Verwoerd, black education was deliberately kept inferior. It was deliberately starved of funds. In the new system, quite rightly, billions and far more money, 6-to-1 ratio, is pouring into the poor schools, yet now we can't even get textbooks delivered to schools in the Eastern Cape. That is the crisis. That is what is taking us back to apartheid. And the Western Cape is saving many thousands of those children. Gauteng is doing the same thing. The true crisis, the true scandal, is what ANC provinces, 7 of the ANC provinces, are doing to the education of young children, robbing them of their future, condemning them to perpetual poverty and marginalization. That is the crisis, and the Western Cape is trying to do our best to rescue as many of those young children as possible, because they are internally displaced persons, which is a subcategory of the concept of a refugee.
And have you spoken to these people? Have they told you that they feel that they've been forced to take refuge, that they are internally displaced people, or is that a label you're giving them?
Well, let me tell you, let's just look at the place that people, in fact, that ignited all of this, which is Umyezo Wamapile in Grabo. At the beginning of this year, without any prior warning whatsoever, 600 new enrollments arrived at the school. People wanting to enroll their children arrived at the school. And there was no registering your child the year before, as is the common practice in the Western Cape. In October the previous year, parents come in and register their children. Nothing. In the first couple of weeks, not even on the first day, hundreds of new pupils arrived. And in some cases, parents just marched them into the classrooms saying, we demand that our children learn here. Now, that school was already overcrowded, and for the past 3 years, we've been doing our very best to get a piece of land that is owned by the National Department of Public Works, which is ideal for a new school.
Yeah.
The National Department of Public Works changes its minister 3 times in 18 months, and every time we have to start from the beginning. I have been on and on at Minister Nlesi, who is the latest minister, about this. I even phoned him and woke him up one morning at 7:15 and said to him, we've got a crisis. We need this land for the school. Where is it? And he kept on saying, well, we're taking it through the process. I said, well, you better get on with your processes because we're going to have major trouble there. Now we are going to have to build 2 schools with all the implications that has for taxpayers' money, and for the fact that if we build 2 schools to replace this one school, we haven't got the money to build another school elsewhere where it is needed. Because we're now, during the holidays, going to have to put up a temporary school on land that is not ideal, and eventually, when the National Department of Public Works wakes up and gives us the land that we need to build a permanent school, we will have to build a second school.
All right.
Now, that was the basis of it. And all of those children are there because their parents need to come and get seasonal work, and because they cannot get education in the Eastern Cape, where most of them come from.
And you know this how?
Because we actually do surveys of our students. You know, we run a proper education system. Everybody's registered in our schools. We keep our databases. We don't have ghost teachers. We don't have ghost schools. We don't have massive corruption. We run an education system, Siki.
So they've called themselves refugees or internally displaced people, or people who are fleeing the Eastern Cape?
Well, you have to have some word to describe people who cannot get their rights in the province of their birth. And if they want to claim those rights, they are forced to move somewhere else.
Let's bring Lindy Wazulu into this conversation, ANC, NEC member. Just reading, someone's line is doing funny things. Lindy, are you with me?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning again.
All right, good morning again. Let me just read a bit of the ANC's response that came out yesterday from Jackson Temba, the spokesperson, who said, and I quote, "To reduce South Africans who have free movement in their own country as refugees is tantamount to instigating against them by labeling them with a tag associated with foreigners. Then I watched a news bulletin last night where they were doing vox pops with people in the Western Cape who were almost indignant that they were being labelled foreigners. And Helen Zille now says that this is indicative of your attitude as the ANC towards foreigners, towards refugees, that actually you associate foreigners and refugees as something negative, and that's what it came across as even in the news last night.
Well, the first thing that I would like to say is that Helen Zille should really apologize. That would be the most decent thing for her to do for insulting those children and calling them refugees, firstly. Secondly, we need to move away from a textbook description of a refugee. And thirdly, the anger that she is talking about that has been expressed did not necessarily come only from the African National Congress. If she looks at the tweet and looks at the comments that have been coming through the media.
Yes? Lindy, all right, we're going to see if we can sort that out. But Helen, she makes a very good point because the ANC statement came out yesterday. This tweet was on Tuesday, and I think since Tuesday you have been fielding comments, you've been fielding questions and all sorts of things since Tuesday before they actually released a formal statement.
Well, you know that in fact Lindiwe Zulu does make a very good point because the statement by Jackson Mthembu was highly xenophobic to say the least. Let us read Jackson Mthembu's statement. He said, "To reduce South Africans who have free movement in their own country as refugees is tantamount to instigating against them by labeling them with a tag associated with foreigners." Now the question is, did Mthembu stop for even a minute to think through the implications of that statement? Did he consider what he was saying when he stated that by calling someone a foreigner, you are instigating against them? Now that was a totally hysterical statement and actually goes to show that this is actually a reflection of the ANC's attitudes towards refugees.
All right.
And it's more that than anything else.
Let me bring Lindiwe back. I think she's back on the line. And I wanted to pick up on that point. And also, Lindiwe, you just a few minutes ago said that to call children, Eastern Cape children in the Western Cape refugees is an insult. Why is being called a refugee an insult?
Well, it is an insult in the context of the children that Helen Zille was speaking about. First and foremost, it is proper and it's allowed in the South African society for people to move and look for better opportunities in any place and in any area of the country, for starters. Secondly, Helen Zille has never experienced what it is to be a refugee. We have experienced what it is to be a refugee. To be a refugee is one of the most difficult things for any human being at any place because we are forced to leave a place where you call it your home. These children were not forced to leave their homes and take everything along with them. The parents of these children were simply looking for better opportunities. That does not mean that they were moving lock, stock, and barrel from their homes and go to the Western Cape. This is why we are saying that Helen Zille must really understand in the context of the political environment of what it is to be a refugee. That's why we are saying that she's insulting those children to be calling them refugees in their own country.
But as the ANC, are you not then giving the DA ammunition to say the things that you do not approve of by not fixing what everyone can see patently needs to be fixed? The Eastern Cape education.
We have openly indicated as the African National Congress and laid it bare to everybody that yes, there are challenges in education, yes, there are challenges in health, yes, there are challenges in a wide variety of areas, including what she is talking about, the fact that there's corruption here, corruption there. It is this African National Congress that has accepted the challenges that we are facing in as far as corruption is concerned. But more than that, we've gone a step further by making sure that we put in place institutions that would assist society and community to deal with this issue of corruption. And by the way, this whole issue of corruption is not just an ANC problem. It's a problem of society overall. And it is our responsibility, both the African National Congress and societies, to tackle the whole issue of corruption in the quickest and best way that we can. So we are saying to Helen Zille, don't run away from this particular incident that we are talking about. We are talking about you insulting young children and their parents, in fact, in my opinion, because they were looking for better opportunities. To call them refugees in their own country is not acceptable. And by the way, for Helen Zille to say that we have a bad attitude towards refugees, she must just go and look at the policies that the ANC has churned out with respect to how we have to deal with the refugees that are in South Africa. Because we have had the experience of what it is to be a refugee in a country and be called all kinds of names. It is this African National Congress that has really come out clearly to say here is legislation that will protect these refugees, here are programs, and here is even resources to try and address the challenges of refugees in South Africa.
Here's an SMS, Lindiwe, from Sifiso, who says, let's be honest, the ANC has failed the people of the Eastern Cape, hence the migrations to the Western Cape. Play the ball, not the man.
Well, the fact of the matter is that it's not only the African National Congress that has raised the issue. If anyone would care to go into her own tweet and listen to how many people have been hurt by the statement. In fact, it's young children, it's people who are below their 20s who are saying, how could Helen Zille say the things that she said about our own children? We have not denied the fact that we have had challenges in terms of delivery. We have not denied that we should have done better than we have done, but the bottom line is we have a plan to take this process forward. We have a 5-year plan which also includes ensuring that we build schools in the provinces, not just building schools in the Western Cape. We're talking about building schools in the entire South Africa to make sure that the future of our children is taken care of through education. This government is the one also that has put in more money into education.
Yeah. But in the meantime, Lindiwe, while you are coming up, Lindiwe, in the meantime, while you articulate your plans, there are children whose futures are uncertain. And if we look at the figures that the DA has presented of people moving from the Eastern Cape into the Western Cape, they are leaving because the conditions are not conducive for their children to learn.
Yes, Siki, we agree with that and we are conscious of that. The fact of the matter is that the destroying of the education system, the destruction that was done in the past on the education system is not something that any government can be able to deal with and put into correction within such a short space of time. That we have accepted, and we have said we will do the best that we can in our powers as the governing party which was elected into government to make sure that we do a turnaround and change the situation from what it is today. We are very unhappy ourselves with the fact that many of our children in farm schools, for instance, in rural schools, for instance, are still having classes under trees. Nobody, no government would ever accept that. We have said to our people, we apologize for the weaknesses in the system. We will do the best we can, working together with the communities, because, again, this is not something that can just be done by government alone. We have, in partnership, have to go together with the communities and make sure that we build the schools. For instance, even the element which is coming up now of people who, when they are angry, when they are annoyed, they think that the next best thing for them is to go and burn a school, goes to show that we still have a long way to go, even within our communities, to get people to be conscious of the fact that you cannot destroy a structure that has books, that has got desks, that has got something that will help their own community to educate their children.
Right. Let me get a response from Helen to that. But Helen, before that, are you negating the legacy of the Eastern Cape province? This is a province which had 2 Bantustans that were then incorporated into one province, and they still largely operate as if they are still 2 separate Bantustan administrations. It's the only province in South Africa that had to incorporate 2 Bantustan administrations.
No, it isn't at all. There are various others that have done that as well. But be that as it may, what I do expect is that over 18 years of democracy, things would have got better and not worse. And you've heard why it's got worse, and you've heard precisely from Lindiwe Zulu why it's got worse. They say they have a 5-year plan. I think this is the 5th 5-year plan that's been put on the table. She also said that they're talking about building schools. Of course, they're talking about building schools. They've been talking about building schools for 18 years now. We're actually building schools, 30 in 1 year, 26 in the pipeline. And frankly, we have just completed with private money the very best school in the whole of Africa, bar none, in a place called Imizamo Yetu. The massive improvements in education in the Western Cape have not been amongst the good schools since the DA came into government here. It's been amongst the poorest schools, where the matric results of the very poorest schools jumped from 57% under the ANC to 70% under the DA. And now one of the top schools in the entire province, one of the top 10, is the Center for Science and Technology, which I started when I was MEC in this province. It is one of the top 10 schools in the Western Cape, and it is in Khayelitsha, and it serves very, very poor children. So while the Eastern Cape talks about it, the Western Cape actually does it. While the Eastern Cape gets the money to do it, the Western Cape finds money from elsewhere and actually does it. And while the Eastern Cape has got a big, long, tragic legacy of homelands and apartheid, we sit with the consequences of that because millions and millions of people are welcomed and accommodated and given free basic services, and a decent hospital. Khayelitsha Hospital that we've now built is the best public hospital in South Africa and probably the best in Africa, in Khayelitsha. We're doing all of that because we're picking up the consequence of the dreadful homeland policy in the Eastern Cape. And we do it with pleasure, and we do it with commitment, and we don't steal the money, and we manage it properly. Right. And every single time the national government goes into the Eastern Cape, they don't make it any better, Siki. They make it worse. Because then you have a war between ANC and the Eastern Cape and the national government that is trying to administer the Eastern Cape, so even less happens. Even less happens.
All right. We're going to hear what some South Africans think. There's lots of SMSs, tweets, there's calls, people holding on the line. So I'm going to give both of you a chance to respond to those, and I'm going to take the calls. Silo, Jackie, Mike, and Gift, stay on the line. I'll come to you.
Morning Talk with Siki Mgabadeli.
26 minutes at 2:10 in conversation with Helen Zille, leader of the DA and the Premier of the Western Cape, and Lindiwe Zulu, who's an NEC member of the ANC. Right, so let's read some of your comments sent through on the platform where it all started. These are the tweets that are coming through this morning. Reverend Kimo Waters says, Gauteng has never labelled all those who seek its gold as refugees. Her unrepentant attitude on this issue is shameful. And Sinesi Po says, Siki, can you ask Lindiwe Zulu why did they have to wait this long to tell us about their 5-year plan again? That's from Kanyisa in Cape Town. And Tarantula says, listening to Siki and Helen Zille, she won't apologize, which is regretful, but she showcases the ANC ineptness. And Afrosborn says, in 2012, we still have mud schools and children learning under trees. To add insult to injury, you still pass if you get a 30% pass mark. And someone, Momash, says, Limpopo has 3 former Bantustans. What is the other excuse for the ANC? And Muzilwazi says Zille needs to extend her vocabulary or improve her diction. Her comments have damaged her highly desired non-racist image. All right, those are some of the tweets. Let's go to SMSs. Greg Kennedy says ANC calls for an apology from Helen. Why not say thank you for helping our neglected kids? And Pierre says, is 20 years a short space of time? And Millie Mtata says, a refugee is an escapee. These children have escaped from an education that is imperfect. Come here and see what a mess education is in. Someone says, yes, Siki, it's no lie that the ANC has failed us. However, that does not give rights to people like your guest to insult us. And Vusi in the Eastern Cape says, Siki, please, politicians are the same. Helen Zille has offended us by calling us refugees in our country. Now all what she does and will do is to blame the ANC. And Abel says, Madam Zille is clutching at straws to avoid apologizing to the poor people that she so shamefully insulted. Lebu says, Lindiwe is not addressing the issue as always. We are tired of plans and policies. We want schools for our kids. Larry in PE says, Siki, Lindiwe has contradicted herself. Tell her to stop saying challenges. ANC have huge problems. All right, lots more SMSs. I'll get to them again in the second round. Let's take some calls. Let's hear from Silo and Nelspruit. Hi, Silo.
Yeah, good morning, Siki.
Hi.
And morning, Helen Zille and Lindiwe.
Good morning.
Siki, the Premier of Western Cape has insulted the people of South Africa. You cannot call people within the same country as refugees. She is now proving our suspicion all the time when we say she claims that Western Cape is a country within another country. It's wrong what she's doing. She's using black people as voting horses and dump them like this, the way she's dumped them. The issue of a protest should not have led Helen Zille to be so irresponsible. But I also want to congratulate Comrade Lindiwe Zulu for addressing this issue so soberly and constructive, and try to really explain what is expected from a leader like Helen Zille. Helen Zille must start to be responsible.
Okay, thanks, Silo. I'm going to have to move on. We've got very limited time. We've got very limited time. I'm going to ask every single caller to be as quick as possible. I'm actually going to watch the clock. I'm going to give you 30 seconds because we want to get as many people on as possible. I've got hundreds of SMSs to go through as well. And let's hear from Jackie in Durban. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Siki, and both your guests. Honestly, this would be very funny if it wasn't so terribly sad. Arguing over a word like refugee, okay? The fact of the matter is these people have to have left because of the appalling circumstances in the Eastern Cape. Your lady there that's standing for the government saying, oh, we've got a 5-year plan. Do you know how many times I've heard the ANC say that? 5-year plan. Why did they let it get like that in the first place? Why did they allow it to become so degenerate in the first place? Why weren't they checking their checks and balances and having inspectors going to make sure that service delivery regarding education was done? Answer that. Why did they let it get like that? I'll listen on the radio.
Hear. Thanks, Jackie. Gift in Port Elizabeth. Morning.
Hi, Siki, and hi to your guest, in particular, Premier Helen Zille and Comrade
Gift, you have 30 seconds. Please be brief.
Look, I think while we acknowledge that Eastern Cape children might move to other provinces for better education, I think the mass exodus of Eastern Cape, in particular workers and their children, to Gauteng and also here in P and also in the Western Cape is not a recent phenomenon and can be explained by the lack of development and job opportunities even during the dark days of Ciskei and Transkei homelands because of the Balkanization. In fact, it can be traced back to the British colonial rule. But I think, to me, this is just political arrogance from the Premier of the Western Cape and also insulting black people in particular, because he's saying if those people are coming from the Cape refugees, he's saying that the Western Cape is just a white enclave. And I'm very sorry about those voters that keep on voting for the DA, because it definitely shows that it's a devil alive.
All right, Mike in Newlands. Morning.
Good morning, Siki. Yes, just 2 quick points. And first of all, Dr. Mpela was quoted this morning as saying that our education system in this country is now worse than it was before than it was during the apartheid days. Now, that is Dr. Mpela has indicated just how bad and how low the education system in this country has sunk. And what has happened is the Premier has beautifully highlighted the disaster in the Eastern Cape. We are picking up the tabs for the refugees that are coming to the Western Cape from the Eastern Cape, and she's hit a raw nerve. I can tell you right now, if it wasn't for the fact that the ANC has been so insulted because it's highlighted their complete and utter failure to produce anybody with a vague education from the Eastern Cape. Now, I am indirectly involved in education, so I speak from experience. They are producing a province of absolute morons, and they're not stupid people. So, we need to really highlight this, and I congratulate the Premier on highlighting this. And I really, at the end of the day, the ANC simply has got to sit down and stop worrying about what Premier Zille says or anybody else and actually fix the problem.
All right. That's Mike and Yulan. Sikwecha, Zongezo and Sheikh, stay on the line. I'm going to give my guests a chance to respond to the issues raised. So, Helen, let me start with you, and then Lindy, I'll give you a chance as well.
Yes, first of all, to your tweeter, the so-called Reverend Kimo Waters, he's the guy who said kill whites recently on Twitter. So he's hardly the non-racist he gives himself out to be. And in fact, he says Gauteng never called the people who are coming into that province for health and education reasons refugees. But what Nomvula Mokonyane, the Premier there, did call them is migrants. And in my view, health migrants is a much more insulting term, because that refers directly to the old system of migrant labor and migrant worker. that was pivotal to apartheid. So when Nomvula Mokonyane said that people are health migrants or education migrants, I didn't hear any outcry. So that just exposes the political agenda behind this.
But migrants means one that moves from one region to another by chance, instinct, or plan.
Exactly, but you see, when you're a health migrant, you're moving because you can't get health where you are.
Yeah.
And that exposes the ANC for being unable to deliver health to people across the country after 18 years of democracy. The health system is worse than it was under apartheid as well for people in 7 out of the 9 provinces. So when Nomvula Mokonyane says you're a health migrant, she's saying exactly the same as I'm saying, but with a worse word, because it is fundamental to the apartheid system to have had migrant labor.
But obviously people are more offended by refugees.
What is racist about the word refugee? I had to really, really laugh when Lindiwe Zulu said, I know nothing about being a refugee. She might go a little bit into my history, but that's beside the point. The point is that this reveals that the ANC believes it is inferior to be a refugee. There's nothing racist about the word refugee, and I didn't even use that word. I qualified it by saying education refugee, i.e. running away from a place where their rights to education are not met, which is common cause in the Eastern Cape, to a place where it is met. And if we're such racists, as the guy from PE said, then why have we just built 30 schools and 26 more in the pipeline, mainly to cater for children who can't get their education rights where they grow up and where they deserve them? And there was another very fascinating thing that Lindiwe Zulu said. She said people don't move permanently. They carry on having their major house in the Eastern Cape. They just come to the Western Cape to get education and healthcare. And of course, that means that the money from central government continues to go to the Eastern Cape to deliver those services. But what happens is that the Western Cape continues to deliver those services. That doesn't justify the situation. It makes it 10 times worse. But far from being the racists that they claim we are actually the province that is compassionately and with great commitment and with a complete diversion of many of our resources, pouring money into children who cannot get their rights in the Eastern Cape or anywhere else except Gauteng, who deserve those rights and who come and get them with great pleasure and with great commitment in the Western Cape, where they get free basic services as they do in no other part of the country. So how racist is it to be picking up the tab for a completely incompetent government in a neighboring province? Far from calling us racist, they should say, thank you very, very much. But I know what's at work here.
Yeah.
I know what's at work here. It's a deep psychological issue. It's an issue where quite wrongly, but it continues today, people equate black people with the ANC, and the ANC certainly thinks that it owns all black people. And so when the ANC messes up as spectacularly as it has and has made education worse than it was under apartheid in 7 of the 9 provinces, then people feel deeply hurt and ashamed by that, and I can understand that. But the point is, we in the Democratic Alliance are not racist. We don't believe that the ANC owns all black people. We don't believe that black South Africans have to be ashamed about themselves because the ANC messed up.
All right. Let me hear what Lindiwe has to say. And Lindiwe, maybe you want to just pick up on what Helen has just said, but also I need you to respond to Jackie, who says, too many times we've heard the ANC saying we've got 5-year plans, we've got 5-year plans. Now, why do you allow the situation to get so worse that you would need a 5-year plan?
And 5-year plans, Tiki, have got nothing to do with allowing a situation and not allowing a situation. 5-year plans or 10-year plans or 20-year plans have got everything to do with planning. Every government in this world plans and gives itself a particular period to implement a particular program. We leave that aside. The second issue that I would like to raise is that it is actually shocking that we continuously hear people like Helen Zille telling us that education, health, and everything is better than what it was during the apartheid days. Well, they have to wake up to the reality and remember the history. The history is that these services, which people are receiving today, services which are being delivered by the African National Congress, yes, with the challenges that we have raised, have never been received by our people in the vast majority of our country. That's the first thing. The other issue that I'd like to raise is that, people move in this country from one place or the other. They can be at a lower level of education. They can be at high schools. They can be at university. People in South Africa are free to move to any area that they want to be. Yes, it is true that many would move from one place to the other because in Gauteng, for instance, you'll have better health services than you'd have in any other place. That is a historical challenge that we have, because even in the past, you would find that maybe hospitals would be better. You'd have Baragwanath Hospital here, but you'd never have any other hospital in any other place. And then the other issue that I'd like to raise, which Helen Zille is raising, which I still think is also insulting, for her to even say that we think, as the African National Congress, we own black people, is an insult again. It is this African National Congress that fought to bring democracy, bring non-racialism, bring a society here where people would be free to move from wherever they want to move, where there's no pass law, there's no that. It is this African National Congress that truly believes that collectively together we will bring a society that is free from all these issues that Helen Zille thinks that we, the African National Congress, thinks we own black people.
Yeah. What is
the African National Congress that has in its membership, that goes out and makes sure that we recruit all South Africans, irrespective of their color, to be members of the African National Congress. Even when we have less of white people, less of Indian people, less of any other people, we worry about that as an organization, because this organization has always been a home for everybody, irrespective of their color.
Again, Lindiwe, I've got to move on. Lindiwe, I do need to cut you there. Lindiwe, I do have to cut you there, and I need to move on. But first of all, one of the questions that Helen Zille has asked and one of the callers said is, firstly, why is the word refugee considered racist? And flowing from that, we are busy debating a word instead of debating the state of the education system in the Eastern Cape.
Well, that's exactly the reason why she brought this word, and I have explained earlier on that it must not be looked at from a dictionary point of view. It must be looked at in the context of the South African politics, not even the context of outside politics, just the context of South African politics. That is a word which nobody as a South African deserves to be called. Nobody deserves to be called a refugee in South Africa. You cannot be called a refugee in your own country. This is a statement that we have made as an African National Congress, and we would like Helen Zille to really understand it from the context of politics, not in the context of anything else.
Can I ask Lindiwe a question, please?
Yes, very quickly.
Okay, the question is, what would you term people who are running away from a province governed by the ANC because they cannot get their most basic rights there? You said people are free to move wherever they like, and I completely agree with that. But what do you think about people's right to education and health care where they live? And if they have to run away because they can't get those basic rights, what do you call them?
I will not give them any name. I will give them, these are South Africans moving, looking for better opportunities, irrespective of whether it's in the Western Cape or it's in Gauteng or it's in Mpumalanga.
Okay, my second question is...
I can't allow that, Helen. I can't allow that. Helen, I cannot allow that. Helen, I cannot allow that. I've got callers on the line, people who are spending a lot of money wanting to engage in this debate. And there's also tweets and SMSs, which cost R2. Is it in Vusewekhaya in East London?
Madlamini and your guests.
Morning.
Look, I want to ask Helen one thing. In fact, let me clarify this one. She's lying when she's saying there are no free basic services given to the people in the Eastern Cape. Secondly, the people that go to the Western Cape and in other parts of the country are not poor people only. There are people working for government, people in parliament, people working for corporate companies, and they take their children to schools in the Western Cape. Why is she only singling black children when she's saying there are refugees who go to study in the Western Cape? So that's the third thing I want to say is, when she talks about these people, when she dehumanizes them, she must remember that the companies that are in the Western Cape are employing these people, and these people are improving the economy and other things of the same province. Why is she dehumanizing people like this? And she must not come.
All right, got to move on. Vusi, please be brief. I'm going to be very strict this morning. Mave in Cape Town, morning.
Hi, Sigi.
Hi.
Quick, Sigi, I would like to argue that the use of the term by Helen Zille is perhaps the general view of most white people that black people have no business in the Western Cape. I don't know why Helen, you continue using the term when people are being outraged and hurt by the use of the term refugees. I mean, you continue using all sorts of words trying to justify the use of this term. Why can't you apologize now that you realize that people are being hurt?
Okay. Thanks. Shakes in Cape Town, briefly. Morning.
Molo Sigi. Sigi, eligama lingesixhosa imbacu yazi imbacu.
Can I ask you to speak in English, please? There are other people who don't speak
because
Xhosa.
I'm speaking
yes.
from
No,
from
I know
Western
imbacu.
Cape.
I understand. I know what imbacu is. So I need you to define it for the people
so
and be
Helen
brief.
Zille makayiqonde loo nto. You must know that we are no refugees in our country. We fought for this country, each and every inch of this country. The South Africans have a right to move whenever, wherever, whatever things it made them to move.
Okay.
We are first it was Mulder. Now she is backing exactly what Mulder said. Mulder said there was an empty country here, and she's coming and saying we are refugees, we are foreigners. She's taking the same thing that Western Cape is a country within a country.
Right.
We fought for a unitary South Africa, and this Western Cape must be integrated to the Eastern Cape and do away with it and have one province there.
All right. Let's hear from Songezo. Is it Songezo in the Eastern Cape?
Hi, Sigi.
Hi.
In as much as I don't support or condone racial utterances, but I don't think we should seek solace from technical words. I'm convinced that if this was said by a black person, she wouldn't have been lambasted this way. I think we need to not to divert from real issues that in the Eastern Cape, we have a problem of underfunded tertiary institutions, dilapidated school infrastructure, striking teachers.
Yeah.
But, we need to address real issues, not to look and, confine this argument into what Helen has said that could have offended the black majority. Right. I think, but, that does not mean that I support what she has said, but let's not divert from real issues.
All right. Thanks, Songezo. Dali Mbofu in Joburg. Hi, Dali.
Hi, Siki. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm going to ask you to be brief as well. No
I will be brief. I think some of my points have been made, that there's no difference between what Helen said and what Peter Mulder said. But I think let's not, confine ourselves to these dictionary meanings. I think what is at the heart of this is an economic issue. The problem with labeling people as refugees and politicizing it is because Helen Zille thinks people go to the Western Cape. Nobody goes around carrying a constitution and saying, I'm now in the Western Cape. Actually, people go to Cape Town. They don't go to the Western Cape. If they were going to the Western Cape, they would stop at Plettenberg Bay and not travel another 6 hours. And as much as they go to Durban, they go to Joburg because the economic opportunities are there. So it's got nothing to do with the so-called Western Cape glorified government.
Thanks, Dali. Dali Mbofu is, of course, ex-SABC head. Right, I'm going to give my guests a chance to respond. We'll do that in a moment. Lots of SMSs and tweets as well.
As we look at power and human nature, I'm sure you've heard the saying, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
It is when people begin to arrogate that power to themselves to the extent that it serves only their interests and the limited few perhaps closest to them, rather than for the good of all.
The Talk Shop with me, Masichaba Mushweshwe, Mondays to Thursdays from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Join the City of Tshwane on Tuesday, the 27th of March at 10 a.m. when the Executive Mayor, Councillor Khutsi Ramokgopa, will deliver the State of the City address. Be part of history when the Executive Mayor unveils a new era for the capital city. Visit your nearest public viewing area or catch it live on DSTV, Parliamentary Channel 408. For more details, visit www.tshwane.gov.za, the official City of Tshwane Facebook page, or City Tshwane on Twitter. City of Tshwane, igniting excellence.
Morning Talk with Siki Mgabadeli.
4 minutes to 10. Lots of SMSs. There's no way I'm going to get through all of them and still have a chance to give my guests my guests a chance to respond. So let me read just a few and then I'll give my guest final word. Joe in Maritzburg says, my question to Madam Zille, is she a refugee from Israel? Why call indigenous people from the Eastern Cape refugees then? A.B. Gina says, Helen Zille, like my grandfather, was a refugee from Europe and Asia. Spio in KZN says, if we were frank and avoiding political correctness on the subject of refugees, we would all agree that the real refugees here are people of Zille's color. And Kay says, how can Democrats call people refugees? And another one says, what does Helen call white students or people who left other provinces for the Western Cape after the DA took together? Corsi says this is a reflection of how these ethnic provinces are manifesting themselves. And someone is a Tandi says the same blacks who are quick to call their brothers Gweregweres are now very sensitive about the word refugee. And someone says, Madam Zille speaks the truth and the unintelligent simply focus on the terminology, whereas this really has many implications that will see the Cape implode. And Ste in KZN says, Siki, the problem with Helen and her DA is that they seem to believe we are gullible. So far, she hasn't answered why she used the refugee word in this case. And Bulelo says, first quarter of the year wasted in the Eastern Cape. That is the issue. What is our glorious ANC doing to correct the situation? All right. Let's give my guests a chance to respond.
I have to go very quickly.
Yes, okay, let me start with you.
My budget vote is beginning in a moment in Parliament.
Let me start,
let me
start with you.
First and then go.
Go ahead.
Okay, obviously there are many, many white refugees in South Africa. It's not a racial term. And I've never understood why the concept of refugee is insulting unless it reflects the ANC's condemnation of people who are refugees. That's the first point. The second point is if we did not believe that black people have the business to be in the Western Cape, why would we build 30 new schools with 26 new ones in the pipeline? Why would we build the best hospital in Africa in Khayelitsha? Why would we be pouring billions into the project of making new residents in the Western Cape feel welcome, feel comfortable, and get all their basic rights with the most generous free basic services in the country? Pangeso is quite right. If any black person had said what I'd said, nobody would have even bothered. But people are trying to whip this up into a race incident because the only thing the ANC can do is keep people hating each other so they can keep winning elections.
All right, we'll leave it there with you. Thanks, Helen. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you. Bye.
Pleasure. Dear Leader and Western Cape Premier Lindiwe, let me give, if we can just drop Helen's line, please. Lindiwe, you still with me?
Hello.
Hi, Lindiwe. There you are. All right, let me give you a final word.
I just want to quickly say that there she goes again, saying that if this had been said by a black person, nobody would have bothered. We would have bothered as the African National Congress, firstly. Secondly, she must really apologize because she fails to understand the sensitivity of calling people refugees in South Africa in the political context. Lastly, I would like to say that whatever she can say, the African National Congress has got a plan. Yes, we have accepted our challenges. We will do everything that we can to reverse the 300 or more years of apartheid. We will fight corruption because she keeps on going to that issue like as if we don't care about it. We are very conscious of it. We have to do everything we can together with our communities, not in isolation as an ANC, to deal with this issue. Lastly, that education situation that you see in any of the provinces, we will do the best that we can to deal with that. Okay. We accept the fact that there are challenges, but we have a plan to deal with those issues.
All right. Unfortunately, out of time. Thanks for your time this morning.
My pleasure.
That's ANC NEC member Lindiwe, EC 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 member